Trustees of the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District is called to order at 8:38 p.m. This is a workshop for the board on the bond, and we have a quorum with all members present.
So, trustees, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it. Ms. Buchanan is going to walk us through everything that we need for the next, everything we need for the next 10 years. And then, so what we'll talk about is how do we split that up and make sure that we're able to present something to the community in our next bond election. And so tonight's purpose is really just information, dive deep into everything that's needed, but also to start having a conversation about the total package. You know, how much do the trustees want to see? You know, the more we go out for, then the less frequently we have to go out. The less we go out for as far as bond capacity, then the more frequently we have to go out. So then we have to start thinking about voter fatigue and things of that nature. And so anyway, it's, you know, want to make sure you ask as many questions as you need to. Ms. Buchanan is going to walk us through this, and I will turn it over to Mr. Buchanan.
Good evening, Board of Trustees and Dr. Nevins. No, ma'am, I have another one coming. So tonight we want to bring forth a discussion about our proposition. So if you'll notice in your binder that we provided for you, we took the binder that you had and we made some modifications to it. If you look at tab number 3, it is a yellow paper. So what we've left is there's a bond budget that we discussed at the first workshop, and it's white. So the yellow papers that you see now is our new bond budget that we've broken down. So as we go through this budget, I want to point out a few things. At first, you see the elementary school. If you look at the numbers, those numbers are different. So the elementary school numbers, roughly for the first year, went up almost $3 million, $2.8 million. The reason for that is current market pricing. And when we originally proposed this 3 weeks ago, it was $315 a square foot. Now it's $330 a square foot. So that's the reason, if you'll notice, all the pricing for the elementary 35 through 46 has increased. The next section that we have to bring to the board's attention is the 500-seat addition. So we're talking about adding 500 seats at Foster, Fulsher, George Ranch, Randall, and Tomas High School. Those additions are the fastest way that we can get building capacity at our secondary level. So those would include a new cafeteria expansion, or not new cafeteria, but a cafeteria expansion, serving line expansion, along with another gym. Middle school number 7 is the next thing, and that's because we have the secondary site. So high school 7 and junior high 7 will probably the 2020 bond package. Middle school 7 would round out the entire secondary complex. The next two sites that we have here are secondary complex number 8 and secondary complex number 9. Right below that is the CATE or CTE Center. That is another building that we would be able to open faster than we can a large high school. That would give relief at the high school level because we'll be pulling kids across the entire district to go to classes at that one campus. So it allows us to be able to service more students with that facility. The next is the land. So the land has been broken down. Right now we're estimating $10 million for an elementary school site, $25 million for a secondary site. Portable buildings, this includes moves and new. Right now, this year, we had to pay roughly $2.5 million to move our current portables around the district because our population is growing in different areas and as we open up new campuses. So that's what that money would be able to afford, is to currently move the portables that we have and purchase any new if the growth grows faster than what we can accommodate. The P1 list, after we go through this budget, we've updated it as well. It's under tab 4, so we'll go through that at the end of the budget presentation. The next is our phase 2 and phase 3 of our furniture refresh. In our 2020 bond, we have our first phase of our furniture refresh to discuss campuses that have furniture that's older than 20 years. The substation add-ons, those will be at our transportation centers to be able to add small satellite places for them to be able to house parts and stuff, because right now they're having to come all the way across town to access those. And as we continue to grow and traffic begins to get greater, it's reducing the windshield time of our employees and to create a better customer service for our staff and students. Transportation number 4, as we continue to grow, again, we're thinking in the next 10 years that we're going to have a fourth transportation site to be located within the district. We talked about the Travis and Taylor Ray replacement to be able to replace an elementary school on site. Then you have Police Department Phase 2. If you'll notice also, this went up significantly, and this was based to the action that the board took in the earlier meeting. That proposal came in roughly around $700 a square foot, so that has been adjusted along with the Phase 2 for the Technology Center. One thing I would like to point out, the last 2 lines in what we consider Prop A, because Prop A is the legislative has said, well, you can put all these things in it, but these things we're about to go through, you cannot put into a proposition. Buses are allowed to be moved into that main proposition that you have. So those were the transportation buses in the first meeting that were separated as transportation. Those have been solidified and it's moved into our main proposition. Now the technology budget, it's divided into 2 parts. If it's part of the building and infrastructure, we're allowed to put it into our main proposition. And then if you look on the second page of your budget, at the bottom, if the laptops, desktop, iPads, projectors, front row, and our graphic arts printer, that is required to be pulled out to be a separate prop. If you take the total of Proposition D and the last line of technology, those 2 add up to be the $75 million that we had in the budget in our first presentation. Does everybody understand the transportation and technology? Because that's a little confusing, but. Okay. So the next portion that we get to would be Prop B, and that is, follow my mouse. Okay, there we go. That is our athletics. Right now we have Trailer Stadium turf and LED lighting. If you'll look at tab 5, we have a yellow sheet for tab 5. That makes up that $3.8 million. The only difference between the yellow sheet in tab 5 and the white is the draft has been pulled off. There's nothing been added to it. We just pulled it out of the draft phase and made it into a final phase for the upgrades needed at Trailer Stadium. Are there any questions about the Trailer Stadium before we move to the next section in athletics? Okay, the next one is practice pools. We don't have practice pools at Randall or Tomas or Terry, so we're looking at adding those. What we did from the first one is we pulled high school complex number 8 out. We're pulling high school complex 8 out to isolate it, because if we decide to include secondary complex 8 and the pool, they would kind of go in tandem. So we didn't want to clump them in with the rest of the facilities. If we didn't include the secondary complex 8, there would be no need in including the pool as part of our bond package. And then you have secondary complex number 9, practice pool. The last 2 are combined, will be combined together, but we wanted to separate that for budgeting purposes, is new land for a stadium and then a new stadium that would be the same size as our current Trailer Stadium. It would have 10,000 seats along with band storage, CTE classrooms, and locker rooms for a second stadium, the same sizes that we currently have. Are there any questions about the athletic proposal?
So the practice pools have to be broken out from the secondary complexes. You can't add the 25.2 million to what you have in Proposition A for the secondary campuses or the high schools 8 and 9.
That is correct. Our bond council says that they have to be part of a second isolated proposition from those campuses.
I believe at the last bond, if I remember right, we had the pools as one proposition and the stadium as another. You guys are combining it on this.
Right now, what I'm considering Proposition B is athletics. So if the board's choice is, we want to separate those as we move out, put practice pools and our Trailer Stadium practice, however we want to operate that. What I'm just denoting is B is athletics, kind of clumped in, but it can't be part of the main proposition that we have. So as we go through this, we can isolate that if that's something that the board would like to do. Is that can be broken up into 4 propositions or how many ever we want as we move forward.
So we could separate it out as much as we want. We just can't necessarily combine.
We can't move it into Prop A. We can't put it in with our elementary schools and instructional facilities.
So trustees, if you allow me, let me provide a little more clarity. So Proposition A is everything instructionally, basically, instruction related, and with renovations as well. So President Hunt had the idea for us to, that the trustees will talk about Proposition A and B and C, everything else, tonight, just have discussions about it. But also then we would create a bond steering committee at a later date. And so we talked about that, and we would have equal representation from each district to make up that committee so we can have equity across the entire district. So tonight, we want to discuss Proposition A, B, C, and whatever else. But Proposition A would be the non-negotiable things in the bond program that the board would decide. And so then the committee would have a choice to look at those, but they wouldn't have a choice to decide to put anything in or take anything out. That's going to be the board's decision for Proposition A, everything that's instruction related. And then the bond steering committee and then the board will also have a recommendation of what will go in the propositions after that. So practice pools, stadiums, and all those things. And so the committee would then look at Proposition A and understand what the board has decided for that. But then also they would have strong input in the other propositions. And so then later on in July, we'll bring all that back to the trustees, and then the trustees will finalize the package that will be called in August. So tonight is really just a conversation about everything that's on here, and have a deeper conversation about why it's needed, when it's needed, what the cost would be. As Trustee Welch asked about, different propositions and everything is in. So this is time to ask all those types of questions. But tonight, we're not asking you to make any decisions about anything or to vote on anything. It's just information gathering. And then in a minute, Greg, Mr. Buchanan will talk about this menu sheet that you'll have in your folder as to what to do with that later on. And then Ms. Cole-Hamilton will come and talk about the timeline for the bond steering committee and the future. But right now, there's as many questions you have about whatever that's in this package will be welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Nevins. Proposition C is our performing arts, and that's kind of the way we took the budget that we currently had and broken it down, what we could put in to our main instructional proposition by law, and then what has to be broken out. One thing I would like to revert back to is our priority ones, which is listed as P1s. Underneath our tab 4 is our P1 list, and you have two P1 lists. The white one was the original one that we gave you, and it was our draft. And if you look on the last page, it was roughly $216 million. If you look at the last page of the yellow document, which is our final draft that we have tonight, we've been able to reduce that almost $9 million in that. We were able to do that by a couple of reasons. The one that you have on the white, it had $2.5 million in fine arts. A lot of that was upgrades to our auditorium. As we started digging through our P1 list, we realized that all the auditorium upgrades are already assigned to each individual campus. So that dollar amount was in there twice, so we pulled the fine arts out. What we have is, you can see on yours, a new addition of $12 million for safety and security upgrades. We can discuss that in executive session what those are, but we don't want to make those public, but it's $12 million worth of upgrades. And to let you know, that $12 million touches every campus in the district. So even Phelan, that's brand new, is getting these upgrades along with every campus in the district to get those safety and security upgrades. So one of the main things that we pulled out of this, because you may wonder how did we get some of this money out? We started looking through there. A lot of our campuses had LED lighting retrofits. Our lighting infrastructure is supposed to last between 20 to 25 years. And we started discovering that we had quite a few campuses that were the 10 to 15 year range that we were pulling that lighting system out and putting LEDs in. So we know that that's going to be in the next round of priority ones, but it's really a priority 2 at this time. So we were addressing things that we've seen in that and going through that list. So that's how the priority 1 list has changed in dollar amounts and the safety and security that got added back into it.
So the NL trustees, would you like to go through the priority 1 list? Do you have any questions about the priority 1 list? We can go through it in detail. It's your choice, whatever you would like to do. If not, what I would like Mr. Buchanan to do is we can just have a discussion about a mock budget, or what a mock budget looks like. And so his Excel sheet, so we just have a conversation and we could start saying, just add different things to it, to the proposition A and B and C, and then we can see what a mock budget would look like. That way we can just kind of get a feel for what a total package would cost. So.
Yes,
Would the
sir.
trustees like to go through P1s, priority 1s?
So for priority 1s, the idea here is that these are all needs. not wants.
That is correct.
And the same goes for, that's the idea behind Proposition A, those are needs, schools, land, buses. And then there are some, I mean, some people might agree or disagree, but there are some things that are wants. Performing Arts Center, I believe, would be a want. But Proposition A, and then all the P1s, those are needs.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So, like Dr. Nichols was saying, when you talk about options, right now, a demographer says by 2026, we should open up 6 elementary schools. So when you start looking at that, what we were looking at is if you want to do a conservative, technologies, there we go. So as we start to build this, as you put these in, you see the totals start aggravating the top. So very conservative, what we would be looking at is possibly putting in at least 3 elementary schools to start with. David, could you hit the equal sign? Thanks, sir. Did you hit enter? So if you go down and you put in 3 elementary schools, again, if you grab the additions for the high school, middle school number 7, since we're building the secondary complex, you were to come down and grab at least the lands for a grouping of elementary schools and secondary complexes. We would definitely need to allocate money for resources for portables for 2 years, our priority ones. And then if you come down and we definitely think that we would need to throw in transportation for buses along with our technology infrastructure. So you're at $750.5 million. And then the other thing that I would think that you would want to include would be our technology for our laptops and desktop refreshments. So at that point in time, we're at $767.2 million just at that very base bid. So that's what it would look like, and that does not include performing arts, stadium, pools, or trailer stadium.
Mr. Buchanan, could you go up a bit to Proposition A where you have the schools? So that takes us through 2026. When would we need to have a passed bond in order to start the school? So essentially, when would we have to do another bond if that's all we include for schools? Because it wouldn't be 2026, we would need it, what, 2 years earlier?
It would be, if we start with just something that conservative, it's probably a 2-year bond cycle. Because right now, it takes us 14 months to construct it. So if it opens in 26, I have to start it in the spring of 25. And then it takes roughly 6 months to get that design. So if you back it back up, you're looking at the fall of 24. And then we have to sell the bonds and get funding for it before I can start the design. And then I have to purchase land for it as well.
So if we do 2 years, we would need to include elementary 38 as well, right?
Yes, sir. I mean,
Could I?
Sure.
Because we've been, since I've been here, a lot of 3-year bond cycles, but I guess since we're a fast growth district, we're looking at 2-year bond cycles. How does that look? I guess I'm looking at Ms. Ludwig right now. Can we sustain a 2-year bond cycles? How, I guess that's my.
So all of that's going to be a function of how fast our values grow and how fast we pay off current debt. And plus, we've got to stay below the 50-cent tax rate, but we still have room. What we've been looking at, we actually did a model for $1 billion, and we were, I want to say we were around 45 cents or so in our latest model.
So if we got as high as $1 billion bond.
We're actually updating that model now.
That's the last time they approved 666 million, so. Okay. But like you were saying, if we do we need to put more in, if, do not as quick a bond turnaround, or put less in and have a quicker bond? And I just don't know which is best for us and the building and the community. That's just.
Well, it would just be up to the board, up to the board's decision about, I always say, the budget with the B on the end of it, is just, how far you want to go. And if you have that, then we know the more we go out initially, then the less frequently we would have to ask the voters to pass a bond, because we will be able to do more. But again, if we ask for less, then the more frequently we have to go out and ask for voters, yeah. So you have to think about voter fatigue.
Right. Yeah.
And the other key is that it's an authorization to sell bonds, and we sell the bonds when we need them, when we need the funds. So that helps you with your tax rate also. And you can pull back if you have to.
Does this 830 million we're talking about as an estimate, a rough estimate, does that include the P1s?
Yes, sir, it does.
P1s.
So right now, the 830.1 million would include 4 elementary schools, 35, 36, 37, 38. It would include the 500-seat additions to our high school campuses. This would include middle school number 7. It'd include 8 elementary school sites, 2 secondary sites, portable buildings, the P1s, transportation buses, technology, and the technology at the bottom. Right now, it does not include the Performing Arts Center or anything athletic related at the 830 million. No, ma'am, if Trustee Renzel, if
See,
we.
one of the things this is why I think that the public we would be well served to have the public in on this kind of thing. Priority 1, provide a covered walkway between Briscoe Middle School and Foster High School for $530,000. Is that a priority 1? How does that get to a priority 1 is what I'm.
Because we have it at other campuses. That's one of the campuses that does not have the
We
covered
have it at other
walkways.
campuses, so therefore we need it here, and that designates it as a priority 1 versus just having a covered sidewalk. Is that really needed in a $1 billion bond? I mean, that's a different way to look at it. If you're gonna say, oh, this guy's have it, so you have to put it there, versus, is that really practical going out to the public for a $1 billion bond? That's why I think that having the public in on this end would be beneficial to
But
this
aren't
process.
all the priority 1s, they were the priority 2s in our audit that was done several years ago, correct?
ma'am.
And so once all those were done, then all the priority 2s just moved up to a priority 1.
That is correct. So we had input from staff, we had surveys that went out, we had all of that when we developed our facility assessment. So we addressed what were safety, and there's some ADA compliance issues that are priority 1s in here, but we're looking at equity across the district at our campuses, and we're fixing things that, that need to be fixed within it. Because some of this stuff, like chillers and boilers, things of that nature, would roll into the M&O budget and affect our general operating fund if we don't address things through this.
And then once we do this, then all what used to be priority 3s become priority 2s. So if we stop doing something, there's something right behind it coming up is the way I look at it. And then I don't know if we start over again, because certain things only have so much shelf life. And the other question I had real quick, if you allow me to, one of the things too, well, if you'll go to the sports, the turf, are we getting close to the timeline where that stadium turf needs to be replaced? Because I know it has a shelf life too.
Yes, ma'am. We've got, I would say, 2 to 3 years max on the turf that's at Traylor Stadium right now. And when we had the light pole incident a few years ago at the beginning of football season, we had a few struggles trying to replace that light pole because the light fixtures that we currently have up are a bit outdated. Everybody's gone to LED lights. When we put up the new fixtures at the new Lamar complex in the last bond, they are LED. And if you talk to our athletes and our coaches who have played at that facility, it's rave reviews about the light that's given off there, the energy savings, the lumens, and so that's what we're waiting for at Traylor Stadium with that upgrade. Yes, sir.
And so I know we're talking about some of this kind of stuff that we want to maybe define the equality versus equity part. That the equality is every school is getting the same thing. The equity is different than that. So I know, from what I understand, the previous bond cycle, whenever we were doing the field over at Lamar, the new field, that we had to wait because the underlayment padding is what another school had, and we wanted that stuff at that school, even though that stuff was outdated and antiquated. Am I correct?
Not outdated and antiquated.
Or just not available?
It was not available due to some shipping and production issues because of the pandemic.
And so that was, I think that was prior to the pandemic, and so they switched, the new standard, from what I understand, was going to a new underlayment, and that we had to wait to get that underlayment for that one.
It was just, and I'm gonna ask Kevin and Scott to make sure I give you the correct information. That stadium was built, the turf at Lamar High School was put down 2 years after the turf at each of the other high schools?
That's correct.
And it is the exact same as what has been put down at all of the other high schools. The
We had the
underlay and the turf on top is identical.
But I think, from what I understand during that process, because I was on that bond committee and then followed through with that, when at construction point, I believe the vendors recommended a different underlayment, and then the previous administration said, well, the other schools have it, this may be better or whatever, but I mean, it wasn't.
One of the vendors offered us a different substrate system. It was an offer that was made to the district, and I made the recommendation that we not take that different substrate because we did not want to experiment with it at one campus as opposed to the others. So each of our high schools teams practices on the same field before they come over and play at Traylor Stadium. Whether it's football or soccer, they are all identical.
Okay. Thank you. I think as we're just talking about just the equality versus equity on some of our campuses, because giving everybody the exact same thing may not be what those students need to be equal with everyone else. They may need some more equity in certain areas. Just comparing to that, we don't want to say everyone gets the exact same thing, because that's just not what everyone needs, the exact same thing.
So one of the questions I had, Coach, was, we're talking about wants and needs. So we have $830 million staring at us right
Yes, sir.
now. And I think that we probably need to focus more on needs than wants,
Yes, sir.
especially right now with the way the economy is, the way housing prices are going up, taxes are going up. The stadium was rejected by the voters, and it was like 90-something million. Now it's, with the land, up to 180 million. Can you talk a bit about why it's a need versus a want?
Our need for a second stadium in LCISD is not going to go away, especially as we are now discussing High School Complex 8, High School Complex 9. Tomas High School is already being built. We are robbing Peter to pay Paul every year when we sit down to talk about scheduling, not just football, when we talk about soccer, when we talk about track meets, when we talk about graduations. Our administration sat through 5 nights of graduation in a row because we have one stadium, and that's how we stagger them. When we talk about ROTC reviews, when Mr. Estrada tries to schedule his band marching festival, and we try to look at our October calendar and when we can squeeze that in between Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night football, and then we try to put some junior high football in there as well, and let's just hope it doesn't rain on the wrong night, because that sets off a domino effect. Then we try to have groups come in that want to do fun runs. The stadium is our largest meeting space. So if we want to have all of our faculty together in LCISD, that's the one venue we have right now that could hold each staff member in LCISD. If we want to have a community event that outpaces our campus stadiums, that's the one venue we have right now in LCISD that would hold it. We made an investment in the stadium in the last bond with the visitors' locker room and the press box, and we're already seeing some return on that investment. We'll hold the Bayou Bowl for the first time ever in LCISD on Saturday. That's a return on that investment. It's a return to our community members and the businesses in this area who are going to get some business as a result of that. And it's because the stadium's been brought up to speed, and now we've got those facilities to offer. And our kids and coaches have benefited from the Bayou Bowl for years. And so now it's a great privilege for me to be able to offer that back as an AD. And so if anybody, that's a small plug, if anybody wants to come to the Bayou Bowl on Saturday. But it's also a return on our investment. And I think when Traylor Stadium over the years was built and improved upon and maintained, we've gotten our money's worth out of it. A lot of people each year come through that stadium. You know, we saw 40,000 people attend graduation over 5 days. So we have a need for a second stadium. We right now have to sit down and flip coins to figure out what our varsity football schedule is going to look like, because that impacts senior night, homecoming. Then we try to balance out when bands need to go to band contests to prepare to become state qualifiers, and how they're going to juggle getting back for homecoming games when they've got to be at a Saturday band contest that same time. And then I've got parents asking, well, why do we have so many Saturday games? Because that's impacting my family time. Because that's the number of days we've got to shuffle them. You'll hear that a school district can maintain one stadium with 6 teams, and they can if those 6 teams all play in one district. But we've currently got 6 teams playing in 3 districts. If we had total control of our 6 teams, it'd be a little bit easier. But we're trying to control 3 district schedules at the same time with our 6 teams with number 7 on the horizon. The need is not going to go away. I wish I could tell you, Mr. Hunt, hey, don't worry about the stadium. Take care of the $830 million, and we'll struggle through the scheduling issues, and we'll be okay. We're going to make do, and we're going to make it happen one way or another, but it's just going to get harder. Unfortunately, it's just going to get more expensive.
We've talked in the past about potentially it getting so bad that we would need to have our LCISD school home games at maybe like Fort Bend or Katy. When do you think we might reach that tipping point if we don't take action on that?
I think, knock on wood, as long as nothing goes wrong, we're going to be okay this year. But if at some point we were to have a maintenance issue, or we were to have a rain out that would bump a Friday game to Saturday, because I don't have a Saturday to give. We're already playing on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So if all of a sudden on a Thursday night, there's lightning that puts us past our DEC policy, I don't have anywhere to put that Thursday game. I can't bump them to Saturday morning because I've already got a Saturday morning game and potentially a Saturday night game. So I'm looking at this year what my options are to move that game elsewhere. Or do we have to bump it to Monday night and then look at their next week's game to meet the 5-day rule and bump their next game to a different day? So we're hoping for good weather and strong maintenance programs.
What do you mean the 3 different districts? I know what you mean by that, but what do you mean for the public?
So we've got schools in our in football, you are divided into 5A Division I, 5A Division II, and 6A. So we have George Ranch competing in a 6A district. We have Fulshear, Foster, and Terry competing in 5A Division I. And we have Lamar and Randall competing in 5A Division II. That's 3 different football districts. They each do a draw to figure out who their opponents are going to be and if they're home or away on any given week. Then we come back, put that into a big grid, and start piecing together if we can make that work with the maximum number of games we can host both this year and next year on a given weekend. And then we start sorting through if those are going to be Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday morning, or Saturday night games. We've also got the issue of safety. We try to put off those Saturday morning games as long as we can because they are awfully hot in August and September. We try to not play Saturday morning until October and as late as possible because we do have health issues. And it's not the players that we always worry about. It's the fans, it's the band, it's the color guard. It's the kids running around underneath the bleachers when it's 106. And so there's some health concerns that we try to mitigate during that process as well.
The surrounding districts that are bigger than ours, do they all have at least 2 stadiums?
Fort Bend ISD has 2, Katy ISD has 2, Cy-Fair ISD has 2. The short answer is yes, ma'am, 2, or they're in the process of building their 2nd or 3rd.
I think one of the things that, just as a reminder, the board passed the last stadium, but the public rejected it. And so when we get to November, depending on what the price of gas is and electricity, and food shortages potentially, those kind of things. That's gonna be the selling point that the administration's gonna have to make to the public. And I think Dr. Nevins had a good point at the last workshop, saying it's not just about football. There's a lot of other things that happen at these stadiums, but I think that might be the majority thinking out there of the taxpayer who doesn't have any direct connection to the school district. Why should I vote for them? They're gonna play fall football in it and you guys want all this other stuff for over $1 billion? I don't think so. And that's gonna be a tough sell.
Yes, sir.
It's not just Lamar's problem, it's a tough sell nationwide, but it is gonna be an uphill sell, I believe, to the public on some of this stuff, but the facts are the facts.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
If I recall, when I think it was when we had the light pole incident a couple years ago, and we were at KDISD Stadium, they have basically a building that is like attached to their stadium where they do trainings or something like that. Is it possible to combine some of these projects so that way when we're making that pitch to the voters, say this is not just the stadium, it's for the football team, but it's also the band, and also it's training for our teachers, it's XYZ.
Yes, that is also, that is an option. And as I was spoken about earlier, as Trustee Wells mentioned, it's not just about football. But as you can see in there, we talked about CT classrooms and locker rooms and band storage. And so, but also, we have a thriving culinary arts department. And so then you can have a culinary arts kitchen in there where we have games and our students can actually cook for parents as they go into the games, and have a cafe in there. And so the goal is for whatever facility we have to be completely student driven. And so when we have CTE programs, we're talking about sending students out that may not want to go to a 2 or 4 year college or university, but going out and be workforce ready. They can have a certification and experience where they've worked in a culinary environment, a restaurant environment. They've worked in an audiovisual environment to where you have CTE classrooms. And so now those students are actually filming games or recording commercials and showing them. And so the sky's the limit for what we want to do, but we want to make sure that it touches every single student that we have to offer, every single student in our district. So we have something to offer to every kid in our district. So it wouldn't be just that, but it would be, but also for meeting spaces as well. And then, it would be a multi-purpose facility for sure.
Ms. Williams?
That's what I was gonna say. I remember him talking about that, so I was just, yes. I mean, would it be, and when you said multi-purpose, so would it be,
Yes, sir.
come on, thanks. Thank you, whoever. So maybe, I mean, is there a possibility, and I don't know what it has to look like on the, what our constraints are when we put them as propositions in the writing, but like being a multi-use facility versus just a stadium, you know what I mean? And so, like, since we have the CT on here and these different things, could we do something where it's more of a combo? But, it's legitimate, right? But it's more of a combo and we really call it what it is.
Right, we could. So, depending on what that looks like, of course, we always have to depend on our bond counsel to make sure that we fall within the guidelines and the letter of the law. But, we would be able to combine some things to where it wouldn't be, I guess, as much of an eyesore, as much of an issue for folks. I think the biggest issue is that we want to make sure that whatever facility we bring forward to the voters, we can show and prove to them how it's going to have, every student in our system is going to have some kind of access to that and how it's going to help them and benefit them once they leave Lamar CISD. And so that's the biggest hurdle that we're going to have to cross. But I also wanted to ask Ms. Ludwig to come to the mic because, oftentimes you get into bond elections and people get sticker shock, but we still don't understand that, so this $830,000, right, is something that the voters will authorize us to do, but we may not be able to issue all $830,000. Meaning, so if our tax rate is at 38 cents, if our INS tax rate is at 38 cents, then it says for this 38 cents, you'll be able to go out and issue $500 million, and then once you pay it down, you'll be able to go out and issue the rest, $330,000, but it doesn't increase your tax rate. And so we just have to make sure we educate the voters to know that this doesn't mean just because now it's even $2 billion or $3 billion, doesn't mean your tax rate's gonna go out of the roof. It just means that you have authorized us to be able to go spend this money once we have access to it to keep your tax rate the same. So it doesn't, and that's a common misconception that our voters have. And that's because so it'd be up to me and us to be able to go out and educate all the voters on that and be very clear in that process. But am I right on that, Ms.
Yes,
Lovely?
and we typically do give the voters certain different scenarios, several different ones, and what the impact of their tax rate would be. And I did go back and check our previous model, and it was a maximum of 45 cents if we had $1 billion bond. But that was also before we got our values, and so it'll probably end up being better than that, so lower than 45 cents. And then if the value growth continues at the rate that we expect, you'll have a little more capacity as well. And then the other thing with respect to the elections and the voter information, we, the last legislative session, and maybe it was the one prior, because it was in effect during our last bond election, there are certain requirements for voter information that gives all the voters all that information, as far as what it's gonna cost, how much we're issuing, and things like that, by proposition, if I remember correctly.
On that, like what Ms. Nelson was saying, if we're making a return sorry, I'm getting tired, a return on our investment, are we able to advertise or, show that data as well? Because I would think if we are adding these things to, if it's more multi-purpose, and we can rent it out for different things, like somehow showing the value of that as well at the same time. I'm just thinking
We can.
Yeah,
in our public information sheets, we can provide all the information, possible.
We did that with the natatorium over here. If I remember correctly, we changed a little of it so it would be more of a competitive pool so that we could have more meat. So it was behooved us to
marketable, yeah.
make it more marketable, and we've seen that before.
Right.
So, but I just think it was just a perfect storm because the bond before that, 2017, we were able to go out, have those meetings, and we did have people come, and you were able to explain that information. And I don't remember that information really getting out as well during the 2020 because we were right in the middle of a pandemic and we weren't able to go out. We were doing things over Zoom, and it just didn't seem like the voters got the information. So hopefully this time, whatever we decide and as a board and as a committee, we can be good stewards of the getting the correct information out.
Right, and I was just in the process of asking our bond counsel if we have a combo type facility, are the rules any different? And can we include it in Proposition A? So in a little bit, maybe we'll have an answer.
All right, Mr. Buchanan.
So, Board of Trustees, now we're talking about next steps. So if you'll look in the front leaf of your binder, this is a selection for the board to look over. This corresponds both in colors and in information to the budget that's in tab 3. So you can look at the budget and look through this. So what we're looking at in this is for the next 2 weeks, for each board member to go through here and check the things that they would like to see in the next bond referendum, whatever it is. Once you make your selections, then it's also here in the back for you to be able to put notes for administration. So one thing that, just as an example, if it has 8 elementary school sites and you're like, hey, we need elementary school sites, but I think I'd like to see 10 or 6 instead, these are notes that you can provide for us as feedback on the back. If you can get this back to us within the next 2 weeks. So we're looking at June 21st. And then what we'll be able to do is we will be able to reprioritize the things that are in this proposition and send it out to all the Board of Trustees in our LBU on June 24th. So are there any questions on what we're looking at for this and information we're looking to gather?
So one option I talked to the team about was kind of how we did the naming of facilities. So as we get a priority list from this, if it needs another set of eyes or for the board to reprioritize that list of priorities, then we would send it back out and ask you, okay, now here's a short list, would you reprioritize this list? It makes sense what I'm saying, to reprioritize this list so we can maybe narrow it down. And then that way, when we come to the board in July, as Greg will talk about here in a second.
So once we get that priority list and we get it put out, what we're looking at is if that priority list comes out at over $1 billion, what we're looking at doing is sending it right back out to the board in a very similar format, but just pared down to what the selection is. And then we're asking that second selection to be due back to the administration by June 30th. That helps us as we start to go into our next phase of the committee. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Cole Hamilton's about to come up, and she gets to jump into.
That's okay. All right, so the next step, trustees, will be in preparation. We are formulating the Bond Citizens Committee, which is comprised of Lamar CISD residents, community members who are going to be tasked with providing strategic feedback, direction, and guidance to the district as it prepares to put together possible propositions for consideration. Trustees, you are going to have the ability to solicit community applicants directly. We're going to ask you to try to solicit at least 10 members per trustee district. We want to have a good representation of our school community, and the first 10 eligible can make the committee. Now let's talk about some committee details and then some applicant criteria. The committee's slated to meet twice, July 12th and July 14th, and the meeting to present the possible propositions for consideration will occur at your July 27th board workshop. Committee members are not compensated for their participation. Their appointments will last for the duration of the Bond Citizens Committee process. The committee may include staff, but again, it should include a great representation from each trustee's district. And then lastly, applicant criteria. We are asking that committee members be a resident within the Lamar CISD attendance boundaries. They must be a registered, if they're over 18, they must be a registered voter. They must be able to attend all the BCC meetings. And we're asking that they watch the May 17th bond workshop as well as this workshop this evening for background context. And then we're gonna open the application window. It can open as early tomorrow. We've given ourselves a deadline of opening it at least by the end of the week, and it will close June 22nd.
What do you mean by the first 10 eligible?
So you may have people apply, but they may not be residents of our community. So it's not just your first 10, but the first 10 will also meet the applicant criteria.
And that application process will be on the district's website?
Yes, sir. It's, we finalized the application today. In your binders, I think the first flap, go all the way to the beginning, there's a sample email, trustees, that we'll send to you that you can send to your constituents. You just need to drop in your name and your trustee district. On the application, President Hunt, we do have a place for participant candidates to notate which trustee district they're a part of, and we're gonna use that to help vet to make sure we don't have an overrepresentation of one district over another.
So trustees, you'll get an electronic copy of this, and then you'll be able to use this however you desire. But there are active links in here, and then it talks about the criteria also on being in the being on the bond steering committee.
Have you decided where these meetings are going to take place yet?
So far, we're thinking about holding them either at Lamar or Terry High School. We're trying to do something that's central to our community.
Any other questions? And any further discussion?
So President Hunt and trustees, we'll make sure we put everything we discussed about timelines. If you didn't get a chance to write them down tonight, that's okay. We'll put all those timelines in the update, as well as a link to the electronic messages you can send out. And then whatever else you need, just make sure you let Barbara know, and then she'll be able to get it to you, as quickly as possible.
Okay, anything else? All right, that completes the agenda items. The meeting is adjourned. The time is 9:27.